Welcome to this session on Standardization and Horizon 2020, how to integrate standardization into your research project. And your moderator for this session is Knut Blind, who is TU Chair at Berlin, Chair of Innovation Economics, the Fraunhofer Institute for Open Communication Systems, Focus, Rotterdam School of Management, Erasmus University, Chair of Standardization. No one could be better to chair this panel. Knut, over to you, and I'll be back later to come out with the mic for questions.
Okay, thanks. Jackie, yeah, my name is Knut, but I'm here today as chairman of the CEN-CENELEC working group, Standardization, Innovation and Research. And I was asked to set the scene, and I'm starting not in Horizon 2020, but a little bit back. This is a chart we produced under an FP6 framework program about this interrelationship between R&D, research and development, and standardization, and we have seen already in the morning there are kind of two ways. One way is to transfer the results to standardization, but also standards are important for R&D. And more in detail, which is also a little bit following the discussion we had here about the relationship between patents and standards. This is on the left-hand side. We produce knowledge as a researcher, and this can be codified in publications and patents, and then this has to go into standards, yeah? And standardization is producing some form of coordination. And then there are some feedback loops. We had that in the morning session where we said, okay, the process is not anymore linear, it's much more complex. These many arrows should demonstrate that a little bit. But what was one insight of this study was, and this was also a question in the morning, I was not able to answer that, yeah, standards already play a role in basic research, because if you think about nanotechnology, at the very beginning there were different people talking about nanotechnology. Everybody means some different things, and therefore standards are needed on terminology in order just to make it easier that we understand each other. And then in the next phase, especially again, think about these tiny nanoparticles. It's important to have common measurement and testing methodology. Otherwise, there's no progress in research. Yeah? That means this has nothing to do yet with the final product. This comes then at the end when we talk about compatibility, about health, safety, and environmental standards, which help the diffusion of new products into the market. What we got, and now I'm getting to my position as chairman of STEER, we got the mission to develop the so-called integrated approach, which was for really raising awareness, and this was also mentioned today that there's not enough awareness about the benefits of standardization in the research and innovation process. It's also about transferring the research results, as I have shown you here, and really to exploit the function of standards for research innovation in order to really push the competitiveness and growth in the EU, which was already stated in the Lisbon agenda. And this was our objective, and what we came up with was this so-called integrated approach, which really put together on the left-hand side research, development, and innovation with standardization on the other side. That means already in developing new research programs, one should only look at publications and patents, but also at existing standards. And then if you really develop these things further, it's important to also think about, okay, can these projects contribute to standardization? And then if there are first results, then they should really connect it to the standardization activities in the different standards bodies. And this was also a question in the morning about the evaluation. Yeah? And in the past, one was looking at scientific publications, at patents as the outcome. But also standards are important outcomes of research and innovation projects, and therefore standards should be also included as evaluation criteria. This was published in 2010 by us, and I was quite happy then to see last October, November, when the first documents regarding Horizon 2020 were published, that we made some really big steps ahead, because standardization was accepted as fostering the breakthrough of new technologies it was accepted as pushing competitiveness, and it was also, as we know much longer already, that standards help to push trade for emerging products. And therefore, in the work program pre-normative research, which was already mentioned by the lady from the commission, from the CATS department, pre-normative research was highlighted, but, and this was not yet really addressed, also standards can help demand-side innovation policies, especially if you link that to public procurement. Here is another very interesting kind of function of standards which has not been really completely developed. Yeah, and we see standards in many calls, ICT on top, but nanotech, bioeconomy, and so on, and much more. And finally, at the operative level, and therefore we are here, standards are really accepted as coordination and support actions. They can be used as means for exploiting research results. And as already in the morning, experts also from standards bodies are invited to evaluate proposals. And here we did some effort, and if you feel that you are interested in that, please contact us. So far there was not really a big positive feedback to these calls. And finally, standards are, like patent publications, accepted as results of research projects. And nevertheless, in order really to take these opportunities, there are some challenges. First, I think here we made some good progress, integrate the issue in the work programs, get also some funding behind that, okay, because just wording is not enough. Include in the consortia partners with expertise in standardization, maybe standards bodies or other experts in the fields. Then the proposals should really have specific packages focusing on standardization, because otherwise if it just means, okay, think about standards, I think this is not enough for projects. Then also get experts on board. And finally, really building capacities in the European national standards bodies. And we will hear later somebody from one body what they can offer. This is the scene, and now the pleasure is at my side to have him here, Lime Breslin. He will be now very specific about one specific area, transport. He's working for the Commission since decades, and in the last 10 years I learned you worked on the field of transport, and he will give us an overview. He will now make it very specific how standardization and standards play a role in his field. Liam, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Knut. How do I change the slides?
You just push.
Very good. Great. So thank you very much for the introduction. As I said, my name is Liam Breslin. I work in DG Research. I probably have worked for a few decades there. I've been involved in the framework program since Framework Program 2. So we've seen a lot of changes in the different framework programs as we go along. What I was asked to do today was very simply to take one theme, which is transport, and to tell you a little bit about what do we do when we're running the transport theme, and how do we encourage a little bit of uptake in the transport area. You'll know that obviously Horizon 2020, and as Knut already said, it is rather different from the previous framework programs, the way it's constructed, the way it's run, etc. And it's not just basic and applied research. We go a little step further into the area of innovation, whether it's pilot lines, demonstration, etc. And part of that is standards. So obviously standards would be quite important. When we work on the work program as well, you'll often see, and I'll come to that in a moment, of on impact, because in the work program now, we don't go for a big number of topics, we go for a small number of rather broad topics. And we describe a challenge, we describe a scope, and we describe expected impact. And often under impact, you'll see us there putting in things like standards. This is just to show you a bit about budget, and all I'm focusing there is on the transport budget. These are the major challenges, which go from health into food, energy, climate. Transport has a rather good budget, 6.3 billion, which goes up from about 4 billion in FP7. And With that sort of budget, it's very healthy. But remember, within transport, we're covering a whole range of transport modes. We'd be covering everything there from waterborne into rail, into urban transport. And even now in Horizon, it changes a little bit from the past. For example, the budget of 6.4 billion, 50% of that is now on what we call public-private partnerships in transport. So in other words, we sit down with the stakeholders, whether that's industry, and we say we'll provide 50% of funds if industry would match that. And we're doing that in the area of aeronautics, we've Clean Sky. We're doing it in cars, in green vehicles. We do it in hydrogen fuel cells. And we do it more recently in a joint technology initiative called Shift to Rail. So these big initiatives take 50% of the funding. The rest is collaborative research. This just shows you the kind of broadness of transport. And in one work program, the work program for 2014-2015 has been out there for the last year. We're covering everything from aircraft to rail to cars, waterborne, but also intermodal and socioeconomic. And a rough breakdown between that is the areas that are addressing the vehicles, that's where DG Research is in charge. Where we come into kind of intermodal, like urban logistics, we work with DG Move. And it works rather well, the whole process. Just to show you an example, this is what we're covering in roads. And obviously, you'll know the whole automotive industry is one of the biggest industries in Europe. I see today, it's very nice to see it, Jaguar Land Rover in the UK are opening a big new factory building engines. Over 1,000 people will work on that. And if you talk to Jaguar Land Rover, and I was in one of their factories recently, they turn out from one of these factories 900 cars every day, of which 80% of them go down to Southampton or are shipped out to India, China, etc. So what I'm saying is this automotive industry, think about the UK, think about Germany, think about France, but also think of countries like the Czech Republic and these, who are all very strong in this area. Within that, one part of it is green vehicles, where we're trying to gradually move away from internal combustion engines, diesel engines, and go more into electric cars, into hybrid cars. And just think about that, think about electric cars for a moment. The need for standards in that area. You take an example, an electric car is going, just driving from Brussels, for example, to Italy. And if you were driving an electric car, you'd probably need 3 or 4 different charging cables and plugs just to get from here to Italy, because you'd have to charge in different countries, you need a different plug in each country. Now, I have to say, standards are actually moving to try and improve that, and we're coming down now to a less number of different types of plugs, etc. Very simple in transport, and I'm going to show you in a moment examples that we've picked of projects we funded in Framework Programme 7 that actually did impact on standards. And we think in the area of transport, we're trying to push our projects a fair bit to keep in mind standardization. How do we do that? It's not rocket science. And from our point of view in trying to run a program, firstly, we try to work fairly closely with CEN-CENELEC, right? They have a number of people who are dealing with transport. Each year, we will sit with them and spend a morning with the CEN-CENELEC colleagues saying, here's how we're going, how can we make it? So a good dialogue with them. Secondly, when we're drafting the work program, when we pick up different topics and we think there's a standardization need, we will try and put that into the topics, and I'll show you some examples of that. I mentioned already the discussions with CEN. And lastly, if we see projects, and we have projects running, and if we see something of interest on standards, we may say to the coordinator, think you should get involved in a working group in CEN-CENELEC and start to bring the results of that in there, and that has proven quite useful. Here's from our work program, and it's only to show you examples. These are different topics in the work program 2014-2015, where you'll see very often, if you look at those, new generation of rolling stock, for example, for rail, where we'd be putting in something there on emission standards. Or if you look at some of the others, on buses, for example, standards for operation, predictive maintenance. You'd see in other areas, intelligent transport systems, again, connectivity, which is becoming more and more important. You see cars on the road now, they're not just operating on their own. More and more, these cars have a computer. These cars are talking to one another. They're also talking to the traffic management system. And we see issues there for standardization. Again, in green vehicles, think about what I said to you on electric cars. For example, we might be looking at new lithium-ion batteries that give you a range more than 120, 130 kilometers. We'd like to go bigger than that. And if we're looking at that, we're also looking at aspects of standards of these, of the battery management system. Here's a couple of examples I took, and I only took 4 or 5 examples from transport, projects that have run in the past, and they're very down-to-earth projects. There's a project there that's looking at corrosion and fatigue monitoring in transport. So you're looking at tankers on the road, or you're looking at tankers on rail, and often after a couple of years, you get cracking on those tankers. Now, up to now, how you would look for that is rather cumbersome. You have to use devices inside. So we're trying to look at new ways that we can actually inspect tanks using new monitoring procedures which would help us in that process. And you'd see within that, as that project evolved, they actually came up with a draft for standardization, for inspection and monitoring of these tanks. And you can see the project actually, when it finished, led to a technical specification. I don't need to quote it, CEN TC54. So that project actually led straight into a CEN standard, which helped in this whole area. I take another example, trains. And this is a collection of 3 projects that we're funding in the area of interoperability. And all you need to do is think about freight trains, for example, that are going, it could be from Spain through France up into the Netherlands. And every time they come to a border, you may have to stop. There may be problems with gauge. There may be problems with all sorts of... So we're looking there at interoperability and trains moving across borders. And what we've done in that is to say, what can we do to improve certification? And in this case, we'd be working very closely with the rail agency and trying to come up with standards. Again, here's another one in rail where we're looking for moving away from metal, trying to use lighter materials in trains, whether that's carbon fiber or others, and we're trying to say with those new structures, how can we have a degree of standardization? Another one here is noise associated with cars, noise associated with rail. How do we measure that noise? How can we create databases? And again, you see there, it has led to, for example, new measurement methods, but we tried to bring that into draft European standards, and you can see there we quote where these have led to different standards. And you see there, out of that project, it led to a CEN document, which again is leading in the area of sound reflection and even airborne. Also, you see there on insulation of such vehicles, it's leading to standards in that area. And finally, on aspects of sustainability. So often these projects, as they come to an end, they're going into working groups in CEN and are actually leading to contribute to standards in the different areas. Here's another project, big project we funded, 47 partners, 16 million euros, looking at European passenger buses of the future. And you know, if you think of in Europe, we have some major bus manufacturers. The technology sometimes is slow to change in terms of configuration of seats, drivers, communication with the transport systems. But we said within that, and we're really trying to look at buses of the future and how we design these. But as part of that, we said there are areas there that could lead to standards. For example, aspects of the driver's cabin, or looking at a new, and here you see some of the standards, for example, on communication protocols, where buses are communicating back with a central control and looking at traffic management. And again, one of the things we'd say there, if you look at standardization, is standardization, and these are just a few thoughts to think about. If we look at standardization, you have to remember in transport, the life of vehicles can vary. For example, cars, they may not last more than 10 or 12 years. In ships, they're going to last maybe up to 30, 40 years. So we need to take that into account when we're talking about standards. Again, when we're looking at standards, sometimes it's the market. Sometimes it's the industry themselves who will want to go ahead with these standards. Often, other times, it's the regulators. And often when we're looking at this and think about electrification, are we setting a European standard, or sometimes are we setting a world standard? And often we'll see some of the standards that we set are world standards. And I know in the area of To take one example, internal combustion engines, where we're producing these, we're looking at emissions. Often other parts of the world will follow the standards, and I think of emissions, for example, for petrol cars. They're followed by other parts of the world, for example, China, and often that will facilitate us to export cars to these parts of the world. And I can say to you, and I go back to the Jaguar Land Rover case where 80% of their cars are being exported. Go to Daimler, go to BMW, Volkswagen, the exports are almost the same to other parts. If we hadn't got customers in developing parts of the world for our cars, our market would be very flat. Therefore, it's important that what comes out of the research is leading to standards, and that these standards are followed by other parts of the world. And we can see in some areas, if I take fuel efficiency, the Chinese will follow very closely what happens in Europe. And one last thing to remember as well, in terms, we can talk about standards in terms of industrial competitiveness, but there are also other aspects which are quite important. And I take an example of safety, for example, and just public safety. You think at the moment we're constructing cruise liners in Europe, and we're actually world leaders in building of cruise liners in Germany, in Italy, in Finland, and in France. We are building cruise liners now with 8,000 passengers on these. They're bigger and bigger, but all you need to think about is if something from a safety point of view goes wrong, that's the number of passengers you're talking about. So therefore, often it's not just about competitiveness. Aspects of public good and safety are also important. And there I will finish. I hope at least we've given you a little flavour of what's coming out of Framework Programme and where we're going in the future. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Liam. Very brief, one or two questions to him before we move on to our next.
Anybody have a burning question? Otherwise, I don't know, Liam, if you can stay and join in case there are questions later on. Any quick questions? I see one right at the back. Can you grab that one? Yeah, because it's taken me too long to get there. Thank you.
Hello, Leonard O'Sullivan, University of Limerick, Ireland. My question is, in relation to 2 and 3 year projects funded by the Commission, these are quite short. So the question is, what are the methods that people can use to achieve these standards input in the course such a short space of time, given it takes a good number of years to develop a full standard? So what are the methods and the ways a project can influence standards in a short period of time?
Yeah, I mean, in transport at least, our projects would probably be a bit more longer than that. They'd be 3 to 4 year projects. It'd be very rare we have 2 year projects. What can we do to ensure standards are taken up? I think one of the things is when a project is drafted, and almost from the start, if people can think, are standards issues likely to come up, and identify this early on. Now, often in a project, you may not pick it up until midway, or we're coming near the end. All I know is when we direct people towards CEN-CENELEC, they're very willing to put these into their working groups and to bring them in there. Unfortunately, when you're finished a 2 or 3 year project, we cannot come back and give further funding to take it forward into standards. So what I'm saying in a way is if people can plan at an earlier stage, I know that's not easy, but at least if you see a standardization issue coming up, that you can maybe at an early stage get into CEN-CENELEC.
Which comes, Liam, very much that point that everyone's made over and over again about anticipation being early. I suggest, unless there's any other burning points, we are running a little bit behind time, that we dive into the panel discussion and come back with any further questions later on. Does that make sense, or does anyone have a burning one? Okay, Knut, back to you to introduce the rest of your panel.
Yeah, thank you, Jackie. Now we have heard what the Commission is offering, but I think the whole thing is not working without the support, as already said, by CEN-CENELEC and its national members. And therefore, we have one of the members here, Dr. Gindele from DIN, the largest and most active standards body at the national level in Europe. He started with laser, and also a success example where research from laser technology went into standardization, which really helped the competitiveness of the European laser industry. And Dr. Gindeles is a member of the management board of DIN, responsible for the topic of innovation. Therefore, he is the right guy to talk to you too. And he's going to present what DIN as a national standards body, like the others, are offering to you in order really to bridge this gap between research and standardization in these Horizon 2020 opportunities.
Yeah, thanks for this introduction. Yeah, Horizon 2020 combines research with innovation. So therefore, many Horizon 2020 calls contain requests for standardization in order to transfer the research results into the market, into products and into services. And we already heard a lot of examples, in particular, if you attended the breakout session on market access, there were a lot of best practice examples on how to integrate standardization into your research program. The European Commission recognized standardization as one of the key elements to support the dissemination and exploitation of research results, and thus integrated standardization is standardization is integrated in a significant number of calls. But why? Standardization gives access to the state of the art. It makes results available to a wide range of companies and research organizations. It supports interoperability. It ensures that the project results are used by the market well beyond the duration of your research program. So it makes really the results, let me say, more sustainable. And we also heard this morning that standardization is an enabling tool. It allows scaling of economy, and so there are a lot of advantages with regard to that. And I will come back to one of the examples presented in the market access breakout session on the EDI, the electronic data interchange, where in one of the projects by standardization was enabled that although very small companies could use the advantages of the electronic data interchange, and I think that's a real worthwhile example to prove the advantages of incorporation of standardization in research projects. And we heard it a lot of times during the day that it's very important to think standardization from the beginning as a transfer instrument. Standardization is as a dissemination tool is not dissemination at the end by a publication or by a conference after finishing the project. Standardization has to be part of the project from the beginning on. But how to integrate standardization in a Horizon 2020 project? There are different approaches. I cannot explain the whole procedure, but I can give you some hints where you can get help and support, and that's the reason why I have this single slide. You can see the access points on the slide. My first advice is contact your national standards body or any other European national standards body by which you feel is appropriate and has experience in your field of research. And you may also contact the CEN-CENELEC research help desk of CCMC, and they are also you can contact them although on the exhibition at the entrance of this center. though support can get from your national contact body as well as from CEN-CENELEC, but although from the national contact points, most countries have support their research organizations by national contact points. They help you to address standardization in your project, and they help you to draft the application form, and in any case they can discuss with you the standardization part and give you the right address where to go to. But again, you have to do it early. DIN has more than 25 years of experience with active cooperation of research in research projects. We are able to support you in the identification of the appropriate topics for standardization and whether it's better to go via standardization, to standardize, or to apply for a patent. Though we can tell you what is already standardized, we support you in telling you which standards already exist and how your topic fits into the European standards portfolio. We also consult the partners regarding the best procedures and which the best result would be, whether it would be a standard or a specification, then workshop agreement. And we define you with you the best strategy and are able to make the contacts to the appropriate committees. And maybe most important, we also assist you in drafting the standards, in really developing the text. But again, it's really worthwhile to use a so-called integrated approach, which was already presented. Integrate standardization and its preparatory stages already from the beginning in order to ensure a valuable result which supports the market access and the research results. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Gindele. Any very brief question? Okay, if not, then we take maybe possible questions later. The last panelist is Kamel Hossain from the National Physics Laboratory, where he's a research director. He's here today to introduce to you a very specific program in a very specific field. Which is, I think, a very good example of a whole discipline which connects research and standardization, providing many different and very interesting and promising opportunities. Kamel, the floor is yours. And by the way, Kamel was also one of the grounding fathers of the integrated approach 10 years ago. Kamel.
Thank you very much, Knut. Good afternoon, everyone. I think it's a great pleasure to be here. I'd like to start off by saying, well, maybe you have not heard metrology at all today, and that's a bit surprising, but maybe it's not, huh? And how many people think it's got something to do with the weather? No? Well, okay, you are all knowledgeable about these things. I sometimes say standards are what we call as an unsung, they're unsung hero. Does that make sense? Unsung hero meaning nobody sings about the hero that standards communities are. And metrology is the same. Metrology and standards are very closely knitted together, and yet nobody sings about the praises in the way that you would expect. But it's your job and it's our job to make this happen. And I think that's what I hope we'll be able to explain a little bit. In addition to my day job at the National Physical Laboratory, where we are very intensely active in developing the measurement standard systems, like when you say what the time is, you know what the time is and all that kind of big stuff. But we also do work with the CEN-CENELEC, ISO, IEC, and are involved in many standards committees. But I'm here also to represent EURAMET, as I'm the chair of EURAMET. And EURAMET, very briefly, is an association of 37 national measurement institutes in Europe. And also it has got another 75 designated institutes. So altogether, we represent over 5,000 metrologists. So it's the biggest community in Europe. And what do we do with standards? So when someone says you have a standard for a water directive, the Commission says we must have some way of making sure that the cleanliness of the water is good enough, and it must not have contaminant A, B, and C at levels X, Y, and Z. How are you going to implement that if you don't know how to measure it? So you've got to be able to measure it to be able to enforce it. You have to be able to measure it to be able to develop the policy that the Commission wants. So in terms of metrology, the future is that if you look at the general industry, there is an ever-increasing need of traditional measurements that are becoming more and more complex. So everything you buy is 10 times more complex than what you did before, 10 times smaller, 10 times faster, and all that kind of stuff. And that means you need to measure better and at the leading edge that you didn't do 5 or 10 years ago. In fact, you could say if you cannot measure anything, you cannot make it. So that's the philosophy. So if you're talking about innovation and competitiveness, measurement is a fundamental thing. And once you measure, then you want to be able to measure it worldwide, all that getting the same answer from the measurements you make, and that's when standards come in. So my next phrase I'm going to use is that measurement, metrology and standards are brothers or sisters or partners. They are very closely tied together. And I'm very pleased to say that with CEN-CENELEC, we've been working very closely over the last 5 to 7 years, and we've had tremendous support from them, and I'll explain 1 or 2 things about what we are doing with them. But for example, metrology is also important for driving new technologies, like nanotechnologies and biotechnologies. What is the toxicity of new nanomaterials? And for that, you need standards as well as measurements to support those standards. And CEN are very active in that area with some of our people. And then, obviously, the big societal challenges like health, energy, and climate change, again, standards and measurement go hand in hand. So just one example, I think I mentioned about, say, the grand challenges like energy. So we have done a project that I will explain in a minute in 2 of our big programs, and one of them was to do with biogas, and how do you get biogas into the existing gas grid system. And for that, the Commission gave a mandate to CEN, and EURAMET was able to use its members to do a research project that came up with the measurement methodology that has gone into standards and developing standards for CEN-TC, lost it, 2034, I think, but I may be wrong there. Don't quote me as gospel here. So I have it on my notes, but I'm not going to look at that. So EURAMET has been very lucky that it's been able to work with the Commission and its members. At the moment, 28 members are in the new research program. We're just coming to the end of the first research program, which is the European Metrology Research Program, worth about 400 million euros. And now we are looking at a new program that's that was approved by the European Commission and the European Parliament and the nations. And the program is called MP, European Metrology Program for Innovation and Research. And the main objectives are European growth and jobs, respond to global challenges, as you've seen, and create an integrated European measurement infrastructure that helps Europe to move forward as a region. Now, what are the specific objectives of the program? The program, for example, has an objective that it will contribute to the European industry developing new products and processes worth about 400 million euro as a minimum kind of target. So we've got to show innovation can happen from our program. One of the reasons I think this program is also important for people who are here and I'm talking about standardization, is that the program has a specific part. 15% of the 600 million euro program will have a specific part to help with standardization. And to develop a standardization activity with CEN-CENELEC and ETSI that will enable Europe to address some of the major issues in terms of developing solutions for energy, environment, health, and maybe in some of the other areas. And the program for EMRP, that's the European Metrology Research Program, which is just coming to an end. You can see on the left-hand side has got the big challenges like energy, environment, health, industrial innovation, and new technologies, as well as developing the measurement system. But the program that we are just starting, the first call has been announced and is going to be assessed by the end of the year, is a MP program worth 600 million euros. But the point that I would like to draw your attention to is that there is a specific module which is to deal with pre- and core normative research. What do I mean by pre- and core normative research? Maybe 90% of you know what it is, but you cannot develop standards without having some backup technological base from which you develop these standards, and sometimes you do need to do research with those. So pre-normative research is the research you do in order for you to help develop robust and very effective standards. And core normative research is sometimes the standards committees are doing some work and they suddenly hit a problem about how to measure something, and that kind of activity can be included in the program. So pre-normative focused is, the focus of the call is on joint research projects driven by the needs of the standards community and call every year. And the call is worth about 5 million. That's specifically to help develop standards. There would be standards output from other joint research projects in the program, but this one is very specifically to help the development of standards. And what I'm very pleased to say that with the group that are Knut chairs, the STARE, which links standards and research, and our Euromet MP program, we have established a platform for identifying requirements. And the idea is that we identify requirements for standards which will have big impact, which are necessary for developing robust standards, and any other requirements that the standards community can have. So the first, and we've got Magalon Chambon from Euromet, who is the chair of the platform, and she has asked me specifically, and Evelyn Domine, I don't know that she is here, you can talk to her, and basically they want me to say, so on 6th of November in Brussels, there is a meeting of this first platform. You'd be very welcome to join. And you can contact Magalon and Evelyn if you wish to join, but you will get some information about the calls we're putting in are in the website that I've just given address at the bottom. I think that's probably it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Kamel. Maybe all the speakers join us here. And since you are a little bit maybe now flashed by so many informations and details, the floor is now to you.
Okay,
Questions?
and also if anybody has, if you've been, I saw somebody scribbling on one of those little bubble quote notes. If you want to hand me one of those rather than say it out loud, that is also absolutely fine. Just wave it in the air. Anybody have a question or a comment? Otherwise, I'm going to put a question to our panel. I see one in the middle here. So if I could ask someone to just pass that a little bit. In fact, I'm going to squeeze round a bit. There we are, sir. It's easier with less.
Thank you. I'm Jean-Marc Blanc from the French NMI. But it won't be any question, but it will be more comments. Just to share an experience, because I'm the chair of CEN on the technical committee on nanotechnology. And we have set up a very efficient procedure with CEN-CENELEC and the European Commission, Georgios Katalagianakis in the NMMP. And we have the possibility for the project, and we have already now up to 7 or 10 European projects that could be in liaison with the CEN Technical Committee. and we follow up the project along the life of the project, and we have exchange of information from the technical committee and the project and the consortium project to be sure that at the right time the information could go and transfer to standards. And we have already now 3 topics, for instance, that has already been from European project transferred to, how we could say, new work item proposals.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Any other comments or questions to our speakers in this session? Anybody want to come in? I see one. You've had the floor a lot today, sir. There's one question I do want to ask them, so if you'll bear with me. It's just really in terms of the advice, because Kalems, you gave some advice and you pointed to some of the places people can go. I'm just wondering if you are, and this is a question to all of you really, if somebody in this room is interested in getting involved in these sorts of projects and funded by Horizon 2020, where do they start? Where's the best place to get started, to get involved? Because I think sometimes people say, yeah, I'm really interested in this and I can see, but I don't really know where to begin. Any thoughts, any advice on that? Yeah.
Yeah, as I said in my presentation, I think there are 2 access points. One are the national standards bodies, just contact them and they will advise. And of course the CEN-CENELEC research help desk, they can also give you the right address. And we have people in our organization who deal with almost every research topic. Though if you contact us, so we can bring those people together and they can discuss what the best approach is, what the strategy would be, what the topics would be, and so I think go to the national standards body is a real good address. And so we also have very good contacts between the national contact bodies. So if, for example,
link into the whole network through that.
One come to us and we feel that a Spanish organization is better dealing with that, so we make the contact to the Spanish national body.
Thank you. Kamel, I think you had a piece of advice as well.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think 2 points. One is that the programs I mentioned, EMRP and EMP, altogether about €1 billion. The program is open to the extent that anyone can put an idea saying something needs to be done. And there is a regular call that comes out. You'll see from the website address I gave at the bottom, when you get a copy of that, you'll be able to go in and give your input, because we welcome that. We don't know everything there is. We know a part of it, but not all of it. And if you say, this is an important piece of work and we want to be involved, you go and put your proposal in and we will certainly look at that. 15% of the budget, most of the budget goes to the National Metrology Institute because it's building up the infrastructure, but 15% of the budget is open for external participants to be in the program. And in fact, we have got something like 1,200 external organizations working with us in this current program, and we've got many people from other countries, China, Japan, US. So why not more of European people in our program?
Thank you. Liam, do you have any advice?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, firstly, if you're interested in Horizon, it's very accessible. I mean, you just go to the Horizon 2020 portal. There's all sorts of information there. If you say, I'm interested in lithium-ion batteries, key it in, and you'll find out where are the topics in the work program. And secondly, I'd say in Horizon, we've tried to make it easier, right? That sounds good coming from someone from the Commission. But we have tried to simplify so that now, if you've got just an idea, that's all we're looking for. We're looking for 14, 15 pages. What's your idea? We'll evaluate that, and we'll tell you it's worthwhile to go to a full proposal. If it's not, we'll tell you don't go any further. Also, I'd say, and you mentioned it, the national contact points. In fact, the transport national contact people are here today because we had them in Brussels. There's one from every country, and if you go to them, and they're easily got the names, they'll help you with, they know the networks in other countries, you're looking to put a partnership together, they'll know other people. So, and finally, I'd say if you're very interested in standards, and not everyone knows about, I've seen projects that start out, the furthest thing in their mind was standards, but as it went down the road, they discovered, yes, and CEN-CENELEC will give you a help. They have people in each country as well. So there's plenty of information, there's plenty of ways to access.
Thank you. Before I give you the floor to make closing remarks, do you have a piece of advice, Knut?
I think the gentleman made the point where to go, and there's also maybe a little bit a promotion for a European Association of Standards Research, called EURAS. They are doing research about standardization. Here you can also contact them if you want to approach the topic more from a scientific perspective, in the sense of doing research about standardization. Yeah?
So there are plenty of places to go. You just need to get started, and then you can find your way with the help of the national contact points and so on through the labyrinth. Thank you all very much. Knut, a last word from you to close this session.
Yeah, thanks, Jackie. I think we heard great opportunities from the Commission in the field of transport, the really huge metrology project or program, which is really a unique opportunity we have worked for years now. I think quite some time. I think even a decade, because the slides I showed you were developed together with Kamel 10 years ago, yeah? And that means it takes time, but now we have the opportunity, or you have the opportunity, and we should take the opportunity. I think this is important. If we do not take it, we'll probably close a little bit the door for the topic, and this would be really not good for Europe, yeah? Because I think standardization is key. We have heard it in the morning. We had heard some examples. Therefore, now the funds are there, the infrastructures are there, the expertise is there, and therefore, please take the chance and do not think only about publications and patents.
Okay, that is all we have time for. So, ladies and gentlemen, will you join me in thanking Knut and his speakers very much indeed? Thank you so much to you all.